Hello, Ron. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, Ron. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine.
Good.
Uh,
I got your audio, but I'm not seeing video.
yeah, I gotta see what's going on. I gotta start video. There we
Okay,
go. How's
there
that?
you are.
Yeah,
Hey, great to see you, Ron.
great to see you. How you doing? Are you enjoying retired life?
So far, so good. I've only been only been at it for a few months, but so far, so good. I'm trying to stay out of trouble, stay busy, get things done, all that good kind of thing. And Um, I was approached by my friend regarding this.
Uh,
He's an old friend from school, and he said, "Hey, what if would you like to help me out with this?" And I said, "Sure, sounds good." So appreciate you volunteering to help out.
oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important. I work. I've been a member of SME and I'm a chapter chair now. I've been involved in SME in many levels, and I think it's very important to have a good dialogue with students who are interested in coming into the aerospace industry. Number one, so they have an idea of what's going to happen. And number two, because we constantly need to replace with new people with good skills.
Yes, yes. And you said you were involved with Cal State Fullerton, right? Doing some work
Yeah,
there.
this is part of SME. So I'm chair of a chapter in Los Angeles because that was the easiest chapter for me to engage with when I was working in Long Beach. And then there's another chapter that's in Orange County and Inland Empire. And their chapter chair is an associate professor of mechanical engineering. And he periodically puts on events. So this was an event, and he said he needed people to facilitate certain tracks because they have a couple of parts of this are designed primarily for the students. And then the third piece of it is these tracks that he has under different subjects. So mine was like opportunities in aerospace. So anyway, I'll do that. I think it's important again to be able to communicate with young people.
Right. So that's the SME, that's Society of Manufacturing Engineers.
Yes.
That's super. Ron, can we go back to the beginning there? Well, first, can you do like an introduction of yourself, and then also tell us a little bit how you decided on a career in aerospace?
Okay. Well, my name is Ron Gill, and I spent 30 years, the last 30 years of my career in the aerospace industry at McDonnell Douglas and at Boeing Company. Uh, when I worked in McDonnell Douglas, I was in fabrication planning, and then I transferred to manufacturing engineering in C-17. So that's how I come to know Tim because we've worked not in the same groups, but we've worked in the same buildings and the same organizations. So that, and I had in total, I have 44 years of manufacturing experience. So the last 30 were in aerospace. So I started my career outside of aerospace, and I had, becoming into the aerospace industry wasn't by design. So I began my career as a as a machine operator in a paper processing plant in Rhode Island. And when the work was slow, they sent me to work with the machinist. They had one machinist. So a lot of the machines had been created and invented by the original owners. So you couldn't buy stock items when things broke down. So I'd work with him, clean up, and he'd show me things. And that's how I became exposed to the machine trade in manufacturing. So when I was 22, I left New England and I came to California because I needed a pretty dramatic change in my life. So my cousin owned a screw machine shop. The old Brown and Sharp screw machines were that was precision manufacturing, semi-automation. It was done with form tools, and that was prior to your commute CNC machines that we see today. So I worked there, and then I hired in with a company that was an oil well tooling company, and they were restarting, and they built drilling control equipment, wellhead equipment. So I did that job for 12 years, and then the oil tooling business collapsed in California. So I was at that time I was the shop supervisor and the welding shop supervisor. So I got laid off, and I'm now looking for work again. I had a lot of experience in quality because even though I went through a machinist apprenticeship program, the companies I went to work for, I ended up being in quality and layout because I knew how to read drawings and I knew geometry and trig. So those were big pluses. So I was kind of like, I wanted to be a machinist, but they wanted me to be something else. So I found this company in Orange that did chemical milling and metal processing. It's something I had never heard of, and I had always been interested in aerospace. So I thought, well, it would probably be a good thing to learn because I could, go to a company like McDonnell Douglas and have skills that not too many people, things are not exposed to this. So that's how it all came about. I worked there for a couple of years, and then I applied for and started working at McDonnell Douglas.
That's great. That's great. So you got in the door, and then can you talk a little bit about your career while you were at McDonnell Douglas, and how you moved on from kind of from job to job, getting your foot in the door and then moving on and
Right.
growing.
So when I worked at this company in Orange, McDonnell Douglas was in development for three aircraft programs, T-45, the MD-11, the C-17. So they had a tremendous amount of work, and they had done plant and equipment expansion. And part of it was a $65 million chemical milling, chemical processing facility in Long Beach. So an engineer that I had worked with at this company previously, he contacted me and said, "Hey, they're trying to put this planning work out on the floor, and it was primarily for cargo floor parts and fuselage skins, doublers, big bones parts." He said
Yes.
nobody there understands how to do it, and he gave them training. He said, but every time they got a new job, they were contacting him and they wanted him to pretty much plan it for them. And he said, he's a senior manager in materials and process engineering, so it's really not part of his job. So I went and I applied, and as you know, you have to the process is your experience and your education is part of it, but you have to pass this series of tests, and then they determine whether they want you to work in fabrication or they want you to work in assembly. So I ended up in fabrication. The first part of my career there, some senior manager scooped me up and they had me working in building 4 and tubing and ducting. And it's like, well, you know, you hired me for this job, but now you've got me working something different. But it's like, okay, it's all experience. So
Yeah.
I did that. I was in that group for about 8 or 9 months. And then I was transferred over to the compound contour group, and I became pretty much engaged. So I did that for a few years. I liked being in production, so I volunteered to go to liaison planning, which some people thought I was crazy because one person told me that, well, the only people we put out in liaison planning are the people that don't know anything. And I'm thinking, well, that doesn't really make sense because people have to primarily you're dealing with issues, right? Stuff that doesn't work,
Yes.
tools done
Yes.
right. So I did that, and that was great experience. It was very stressful, but there was because again, we're in development on these programs, and every time there's a major problem, everything's behind schedule. So I did that until 1993. Then in the big downturn, I was laid off. I was supposed to be slotted into a job in Huntington Beach as a manufacturing engineer, but that job got frozen. So I was out of work for a couple of months. And then I took a job with McDonnell Douglas Technical Services as an ME, and I had to go to Macon, Georgia. So I worked in Georgia for a little while, which was a big change because my family's in California. It was the only job. There were no jobs. So at that time, if you had aerospace experience in 1993, there were so many layoffs, you were getting a job anyway. So I went there and then I transferred. Then that job, I got finally got the solid job offer in Huntington Beach. So I went to Huntington Beach and I worked there. Then that job was kind of shaky. So I left aerospace briefly, went for a company that made breathing apparatus for the fire department and those kind of things. So I did that. And then when Convair shut down, I was contacted and brought back to Long Beach as a planning production engineer. So I did that a couple of years. Then I became the manager of one of the groups. At the time, there was like two managers for all the people. So I was one of the managers. And I did that. And then things were looking pretty good, but the 737 program work that was coming to Long Beach was all shut down. And I knew people in the Everett plant. And somebody told me, well, I was just in a meeting and they're going to close the Long Beach facility in June. So this is like in January. He said, but this is like hush hush, you can't talk about it. So I was like, okay, now I know I have to make a plan to get back into something else. So I was part of the factory shutdown, working for C-17 as an ME, and we had to transfer certain equipment and tools out of Long Beach because the suppliers that were going to do the work didn't have the capability. So these things had to be removed, machines had to be taken apart, moved, processes had to be moved, tooling had to be moved. I did that. Then I was also part of factory automation on C-17. So I had done that for about 2.5 years. Worked on the broche ring riveter and on a 5-axis CNC mill for fuselage skins. So I kept moving along with my career. And in some cases, I think the reason I became successful is because I would volunteer for difficult tasks. So people would say, "Oh, they need somebody to do that. And that's impossible. Nobody can do that." So it's like, okay, you know what? I'll take on the challenge. So I did that, and I worked. I worked in the fuselage and final assembly. Then I decided that Boeing was promoting this two-track system now. So you could either go into the business side or the technical side. And the technical side was the technical fellowship. So I applied for that, and that's a really difficult, very arduous process. And first time through, I didn't make the cut. I applied again, and then I became ATF. And at the same time, I became the technical lead engineer for the fuselage. Then my boss ended up taking over the wing. He had been the director of the wing. So he did some type of a coup and he took over the wing. So now he's responsible for the fuselage and the wing. So it's like, okay, well, here, now you're responsible for the wing too. So I was like, man, it was tough. But it was a great career. But again, when I got into the tech fellowship, there were 3,000 production engineers worldwide in Boeing, and there were only 53 of them were tech fellows. So particularly on the production engineering side, it was very, very difficult. Most of the people that were in the tech fellowship were into software and design and things like that, people that had done inventions. So it was quite an accomplishment. There was a lot of hard work, and as you know, we work in extremely stressful environments. So there we had to do the impossible, and sometimes almost on a weekly basis. So that's pretty much sums up my McDonnell Douglas Boeing career. And again, considering that never in my life when I was growing up would I see myself as an aerospace engineer because my background, we were kind of like a working class poor family. I never met my father. My mother had mental health issues. And when I was 16, I quit school because I needed money. The day I turned 16, I quit school. It was a big mistake, but at the time, if you think about it in the young mind, it was justifiable. So
Sure.
that didn't last long. I went back to high school and I completed my GED. And then I was just kind of, you know, wandering along from job to job. So this thing didn't come to fruition until I moved to California and then became serious about being in manufacturing and then having the desire to move into positions like that and to move ahead.
Yeah, and for the younger folks, the college students and so forth that are going to be seeing this video, um, you could probably tell them a little bit in terms of, you don't have to be specific about what you've earned, but that you were able to make a good living and there's good money working in manufacturing and operations in aerospace, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So even when I first started, of course, back in those days when you worked in machine shops, the normal work schedule was 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and 5 hours on Saturday. And the way they sold it is, well, we're not going to offer you an outstanding starting wage, but with the overtime, you'll be able to earn good money. That became a way of life until I moved into the aerospace industry. But as I did and I moved along, I certainly, as you move along with your career, there's certainly opportunities for advancement. And then there's financial benefits that come along with it. So, I know today, to some degree, people portray working in manufacturing as being, a dirty, cheap labor job. And while there are those types of positions available, the aerospace industry is quite different. So you have an opportunity, you get a good foundational education, and you have an opportunity to advance. But at the same time, you're going to have to find these opportunities or create your opportunities. But yeah, and then, unfortunately today there's no retirement package at Boeing, but we were fortunate up to a period of time where we accumulated retirement. So now that I'm retired, between retirement and Social Security and the 401k that you can invest in, and there's a lot of benefits. All my education was almost 95% of it was paid for by the company. So I earned my bachelor's of science degree and I earned my MBA. The MBA alone, and this is 20 some years ago, it was like $60,000. If you were doing this on your own, it's quite a bit of student debt. So there's another advantage other than the pay is really good, and the higher you go, the better the compensation is. But the benefits that are still there are excellent, and you're getting a lot of if you can go and get a degree or even certifications, and the company's going to pay for it, then that's just like more money in your pocket because you're not going into debt to go to those levels.
Yeah, so there are advantages to working for some of the larger companies that help you with your education.
Yeah.
Ron, you said something that it sounds like it's a common thread through your life as part of your character, and that is you volunteered for the hard things. That's often that's not the norm. If you got 10 people, 10 employees, and they say, hey, we got this tough job, chances are it's going to be one that steps forward, and you were the one. And you know what? I found that the same in my career. That like I was working on a project. I was supporting the KC-10 program office. This goes back quite a ways. You and I both go back quite a ways. And they were working on the secondary retention on the tri-jet after the Chicago crash.
Oh
You
yeah.
remember the DC-10 that crashed in
Oh yeah.
Chicago? They lost the engine, it tore out the hydraulics, and it rolled over and crashed. And so there was a leader in the program office. He said, "Hey, we're can somebody track these parts for this modification over in Torrance?" And I said, "Hey, I'll do it." So because I'd done some of that work, working in spares and working in supply chain and working with parts, and so that led to an offer to go work in the KC-10 program office. At that time, it was DC KC-10, but
Right.
Tri-Jet program office, and that was sort of a prestigious thing.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't a lot of money. It wasn't a huge thing, but to me it was a big deal. I was still a youngster, but it came from me being willing to do something and taking a risk and jumping in and going and taking this challenge. And I saw that in you, what you said. And when I was like you when I was a kid, when I turned 16, man, I wanted to go to work because I wanted to make
Right.
some money so I could put gas in my car and take my girlfriend out on dates and buy some clothes and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I was based on my upbringing. I was always a risk taker, and the biggest risk I took was when I had grown up in southern New England, and I knew because things that were going on around me that I was going to get deep into things that weren't best for me. So I just moved to California. And I had a cousin who owned a machine shop, but I didn't know anybody out here. So it was a dramatic change. And for the first couple of years, it was extremely difficult because I had made my mind up. I'm not going back to where I lived, right? I'm going to
Yeah,
stay here no matter what. So
yeah,
I did. So I think a lot of that became once you've taken risks. And the other thing too is seeing things as opportunities. So, I look at opportunities as like three levels of opportunity. There's opportunity that's presented to you, and I had a couple of opportunities when I was younger. People offered me jobs when I was young, and it was a big change for me. Then you recognize opportunities and you pursue them. And then as you move on with your career, you create your own opportunities. And like you're
right.
saying, you get into these positions and sometimes you take on these difficult jobs, but when you do, that's something that's noteworthy and people notice it. But it's also a building block process because some people will take a job and they just come in and they do what they have to do and they go home and they do that year after year after year. And probably, they're not driven to change or advance. So if you want to move along, particularly in the aerospace industry, then you have to move into different positions. And when you have a record of, taking on challenges and being successful with them, that becomes noted. And it's also something that you put in your resume. As you go through these things, you document it. I always keep something that's an employment history, different projects I worked on, what the challenges were, what the benefits were. And then I was very fortunate because some of the projects on C-17, I I won awards with ASQ, Silver Eagle Award, Boeing Quality Award, Lean Manufacturing Awards. And it wasn't that when I took these assignments on that I was looking to win awards. This was something that was a benefit of being involved, right? And then you
Yes.
remember Don Pitcher, my director, he was really big on he wanted all these awards. So he would really promote you to do it. Some of my previous directors, you tell them, well, we did this project and we're going to put it in for the Silver Eagle Award. And he's like, yeah, go ahead, do whatever you want. There was nobody there that was saying, yeah, okay, I'm going to support you. So the support was good. But yeah, it's some people aren't interested. They're just interested in doing a job and going home. And and when you deal with them, like when I was TLE, you understand the capabilities of the people that you're the lead engineer over, and sometimes that dictates when certain things come up. Is if you've got a difficult assignment, then if you just give it to the first person that walks in the door may not be interested in it, then not only they may fail, but you're going to fail too, because everybody's going to look at you like, well, it was your decision. You gave this to this person. And that's why sometimes too, when people are in these positions, you get overwhelmed with work because after a while, it's like, well, Tim or Ron, they'll get the job done. So we'll give them this and we'll give them that. And then sometimes you have to kind of sit back and say, you're overwhelming me with too much work. But I have no regrets. And again, based on my nature, I was always like, I always wanted to do more and be more.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I, I know we're getting toward the end of our time. Uh, and Ron, you shared a lot of good information about your journey. What I was going to ask you was, could you share what you would recommend to the folks that are going to be seeing these videos? And what I'm talking about primarily be college students. And a lot of them, they're thinking, hey, I'm going to go work in Google or Microsoft or X, Twitter, you name it. Why do you think a career in manufacturing, operations, supply chain, et cetera, is a good career?
Well, there is a lot of opportunity. And again, if you want to pursue the opportunity, it's there. But I think fundamentally, particularly people that are in school now, in order to be successful in any technical career, you need to develop your critical thinking skills. You should be pursuing courses that go over cause and effect relationships, analysis of data, root cause analysis, because in a lot of these technical jobs, particularly in engineering, you are going to be working on things that first you have to figure out what is the problem. Then the next step of it is what is the solution? Like with us, with projects that required money, then you had to do a presentation to change board to get approval, and then you had to go out and be successful with it. So I believe that that's something that's probably not emphasized enough, at least with the young people that I had experience with the last 8 or 10 years of my job. So that's very important. If you're interested in the aerospace industry in particular, then metallurgy and then ASME Y 14.5 geometric dimensioning and tolerancing, those are the things you need to get exposed to because that is the technical language in manufacturing. And even if you go to work for other companies that aren't aerospace, you need to understand that language. Metallurgy is important because of knowing the difference between materials and material behaviors, because a lot of times issues that you have in manufacturing are related to material behaviors. So I think those are critically important. And again, if when you graduate, which is great, you're going to have a very solid foundation. Your education is your foundation. But when you build your house on that foundation, that comes from the experience that you're going to get with your employer. So, it's good to have that good solid foundation, but now your experience comes with your work with your employer. And with any job, it's, even though you could be brilliant, it's going to take a few years before you really gain enough knowledge. I remember in planning, the older guys said, well, you're going to be here for 5 years before you really understand what you're doing. And to me, it's like 5 years. Are you kidding me? It's going to take me 5 years to learn this job. And I was still learning the job the last year I was working there. So, it wasn't an exaggeration, but it's something that takes time and you have to build on it. And unfortunately, what we experienced were what I call it is like resume building. Some young people, they're going to go work for Boeing for 3 years, and then they're going to quit and they're going to go to Lockheed, and then they're going to quit and they're going to Northrop Grumman. And I don't think overall that's beneficial to you. Now, there may be good reasons for you to leave from one company to another if there's opportunity there, right? That maybe Lockheed Martin's offering you something that you don't see that you're able to achieve at, say, Boeing or Northrop Grumman. That would be a reason. But just to change jobs, and then say, look, I've got 9 years of experience with three companies, but every company is a little bit different. I think you're going to have to understand in any highly technical company, it's going to take a few years for you to get a good grounding in what you're doing so that you can move ahead. So that would be one. And another thing that I don't mean to sound mean, but your grade point average in college is very important. You're gonna have a 4.0 grade point average, and you'll get an extender when you graduate. But when you go into the working world, your grade point average now, if you tell people, well, I had a 4.0 grade point average in statistics. So it's like, okay, but that doesn't, that doesn't really have any bearing on what you're doing in your professional employment. So, and another thing that we ran into periodically, people would come from one company to the next and they'd say, oh, well, that's not the way we did it at Rockwell. And you'd have to say, well, you're not working at Rockwell anymore. Rockwell did things a little bit different. Their products were a little bit different. So, I think that's it. You have to be in for the long haul. And it doesn't matter if you're going to go work for Google, that's fine. But the way technology is changing, some of these companies, and I'm saying Google's going to our business, but some of these companies and these opportunities are come and gone in 10, 15 years. Boom, here they are, there they go. The
Right.
aerospace industry, uh, it's something that I believe is going to be around for quite a while. Now it's going to change, and there's going to be advancement. There's going to be advances in methods, and it's good if you have the background so that you can adapt to that. That's probably important. But, again, some people they want to go work for a company for a couple of years, and then you're going to work for another company. I don't know. So I think to me, it's pretty much the industry that you're interested in. But when you have, if you have a mechanical engineering background and you have engineering experience, you can move to medical devices industry. You can move to other industries, if you choose to or if you have to, because you have this foundation and you have this experience.
Yeah, I think it's a positive trend is going on right now where more manufacturing is coming back to America, which I like to see. I feel positive about that. There's money to be made. There's profit and wealth to be made by keeping things in house. I think.
Mhm.
I know when we went global, globalism, and we started offloading all of our parts manufacture. Um,
Uh,
they thought that was going to be really good for the company, and maybe it has been overall. I don't know, but when you take a part that you're making in Torrance and you send it to Taiwan or Mexico or Russia, now you've got language issues, you got geography, you got time, the schedule is different, the language is different. How do you manage that? And it becomes expensive to do all that by nature of sending it to another country. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I feel good about seeing manufacturing coming back to America.
oh, absolutely. And I remember I did I had a lot of experience with the supply chain, supplier management, and also with major subs,
Mhm.
based on our products. And fortunately, because I had this fabrication background, I could go to a supplier and people say, well, here, let me show you your paperwork. It's like, okay, I see your paperwork. It looks good. Now let's go out and let's watch you build the product. I want to see how you build the product because sometimes you have paperwork and you don't follow it. But the big problem was, particularly with major subs, if you received parts that were, that didn't fit the aircraft right. You had to do a lot of rework and repair. It would take 18 months before you would see if you made a change, identified the problem, made the change. Sometimes that took a couple of months. When you implemented it, it would take up to 18 months before you received those parts. So now you could have a year and a half to 2 years of every time the aircraft comes in flow, you're going to have to go in and constantly be doing this rework and repair. When we dealt with our own, like with St. Louis, or when we dealt with Macon, Georgia,
Mhm.
not that it was something that you could do in weeks like we did in Long Beach and Torrance, but you could cut everything down to months. So you
Yes.
go out there, work with those people, you all understood the same technical language, and the change was made, and then you would see results a lot quicker. So I always used to argue is the offsets that, yeah, you're paying less for less of these parts and assemblies, but what we're paying for rework and repair, when you add it in together, it's more than if we did it ourselves. So
Yes.
that,
Yes.
yeah, and then you run into the problem too, even within your own organizations, the supplier management. Uh, a lot of the engineers that I work with call them supplier advocates, because when you bring up issues, then they'd say, "Oh, you're just saying that because you don't like the supplier." And it's like, I'm personally, I don't care about the supplier. This is not me. But if these parts aren't right and they're causing us rework and repair, then it needs to be fixed. And sometimes you even had to, in-house wrestling before you could get on a playing field with the supplier itself. So keeping the work in this country is a lot better. The methods of manufacturing are a lot more advanced. So when I was a machinist, there used to be a couple of pages of jobs for machinists in the Orange County Register. And now you're lucky if you see two or three ads, and a lot of it is they need people that do programming, and there are machine operators, but now a lot of the skill set has moved to NC programmers and people
Mhm.
who do modeling. Those things are a lot more important. But again, what it does is you don't have as much touch labor, and so I think it's definitely good. You have to control a certain aspect of your parts and assemblies, the ones that are critical to your build process, because once you let them go, then your headaches really build up. So I see it's a good opportunity, particularly now that our government on different levels is supporting bringing the work back and
Right. Right.
supporting trades. Where for years the trades were kind of looked at, even when we were in high school. If you said you wanted to take machine shop class or you wanted to do auto mechanics, they'd say, "Well, why do you want to do that?
Right.
You know, you
Yes.
should you should be taking advanced algebra." And it's like, well, okay, but if my car breaks down, advanced algebra is not going to help me, right? So,
That's
and
right.
I'll share one last thing. When we worked with machine suppliers in Germany and in Spain, but particularly in Germany, Broche Automation. When you went to the Broche factory, and a lot of it we were doing, critical design reviews and watching the progress on this equipment, because this equipment was expensive and it was important to our build process. But the first thing they did is they took you into a room and they showed you the pictures of all their apprentices. They said, "These are all our apprentices." And we said, "Oh, that's interesting." And I said, "Well, in apprenticeship programs, how do you fund the apprenticeship programs?" And what was happening in Germany at the time is the state government paid a third of the wages, the federal government paid a third of the wages, and then the people that were hiring the apprentices paid a third of the wages. So there was this revenue sharing. They could bring these people in, they could train them, and then the expense of them doing it, and they were very proud of it. They'd take you out. "Oh, here, this is George. He's an apprentice. You saw his picture in there." So it wasn't like, "Yeah, these guys, we got them, they're apprentices, and let's go out and have a cup of coffee." So I see that as another trend that's changing, and I think that's very important, because we don't, in the manufacturing industry, it's very important to have, you know, highly educated people, but then at the same time, it's very important to have technicians. And it's not that they're highly educated, they're just not interested in a 4-year degree.
Yeah, I mean, you hire a good mechanic that comes out to your house to fix something, and it's because they get paid good because they know how to fix something. You know,
Exactly.
that it's not that they have a PhD in nuclear physics or anything. It's that
Mhm.
they know how to fix your pipe on your house or whatever it is. Hey, Ron, we're just about out of time. I want to
Okay.
thank you so much
Well,
for
thank you for the
participating.
opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be sending you a copy of the video, and look forward to talking to you more in the future. I'd like to come to your thing over at Cal State Fullerton.
Yeah, I'll send you an invitation.
Okay, super.
Yeah, we have to register because they're serving lunch, but I'll send you